Jaguars fans and Commanders fans, get excited with me, y'all. The wait is finally over. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Washington Commanders will be kicking things off week 1 at FedEx Field to begin the new season. As I'm recording today's video, man, the Bills and the Rams will be playing tonight on Thursday night to kick off the new NFL season. I am just so excited that football is finally back in my life, in y'all's life. The energy and the vibe is immaculate. We are just feeling ourselves, man, and I'm just so grateful that football's back, man. I cannot stress that enough. So excited for this matchup, not just because it's my Jaguars playing and I get to see Jaguars football back, and not just because it's the Commanders fans in this video watching and supporting. It's because there's actually a lot of intriguing headlines when you look at this matchup. Let's take a look at the Washington Commanders first and foremost. This is their first game as a brand new franchise, essentially, under Dan Snyder. And now that they've gone from the Washington Redskins to the Washington football team, now the Washington Commanders, this will be their first game, really and officially, as the new team. You look at the newly acquired quarterback in Carson Wentz. This looks like his last opportunity to become a starting quarterback in the NFL and to keep his job, essentially, after what the Commanders had given up to get Carson Wentz from the Indianapolis Colts. And now this is Wentz's third consecutive year in a row where week 1 he's going to be starting with a new team. You look in 2020, it was with the Eagles, 2021 with the Colts, and now 2022 with the Washington Commanders. And then you look at the Jaguars. The Jaguars have a brand new head coach in Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson's very familiar with a guy like Carson Wentz on the opposite side of the ball. So there's a lot of intriguing matchups and headlines when you look at this thing in its totality. But I'm going to start off by talking about the Washington Commanders on both sides of the ball before I get into the Jaguars, and then I'll give my final verdict at the end. So let's start on the Commanders' offensive side of the ball, and obviously I'm going to start at the quarterback position with Carson Wentz. Now, Carson Wentz obviously has had his ups and downs throughout his NFL tenure. Obviously, 2017 was his best season prior to him going down with injury with the Philadelphia Eagles under Doug Peterson, when Carson Wentz was 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3,200 yards prior to him going down with that injury before Nick Foles came in, saved the day, and won the Super Bowl. But that feels like an eternity ago since the Eagles and Carson Wentz were playing at that elite of a level. Then you look at Carson Wentz last season with the Indianapolis Colts. While they did miss the playoffs due to the Jaguars beating them in Week 18, Carson Wentz did have a very solid season. 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and had a very productive season under Frank Reich, but he ultimately wasn't able to get the job done, and the Colts felt the need to move on from him. But now Carson Wentz has another opportunity with the Washington Commanders to amend that and also continue to prove that he can be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. And even when you look at their backup quarterback and a guy like Taylor Heineke, a guy who a lot of NFL fans have a lot of respect for, he's made it very obvious and clear from the get-go that Carson Wentz is going to be the starter. And I think Carson Wentz has deserved that opportunity to get another chance in the NFL. I'm not the biggest believer in him, but he does have a lot of talent and he's got a lot of skill set that you want to see out of a guy. I just think the real thing is with him is his leadership ability. But you go to the skill position players, you look in the backfield with guys like Antonio Gibson, who's shown a lot of promise in his young time in the NFL. And then also in the backfield with J.D. McKissic as well too. And I love their wide receiver core right now with guys like Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, their first round pick out of Penn State, someone who I was very, very high on. And obviously Terry McLaurin is one of the best in the game at the receiver position. Logan Thomas is a solid, not great, but he's a solid tight end in the NFL. And then their offensive line, if you ask me, I feel like it's just middle of the pack. You got Andrew Norwell coming over from the Jaguars, coming in to fill in that interior guard position at the left guard spot. But obviously another guy that's going to headline that, Charles Leno. He's another solid and productive guy who's going to be there at the left tackle position, guarding Carson Wentz's blind side. The Commanders on offense have some potential. I don't love it, but there's definitely some solid players there. But obviously you're going to look at their wide receiver core with guys like Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, and Terry McLaurin and say that's the strongest part of their offense. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Now on the defensive side of the ball for the Washington Commanders, obviously the biggest name that we're going to talk about is with Chase Young, who re-aggravated his ACL at Von Miller's camp. It was questionable whether he was even going to begin the season, and it's looking like he won't. I just want to say first and foremost, man, prayers up to Chase Young because he's a phenomenal player. This guy was an absolute stud at Ohio State, and there was a reason why he was such a high draft pick just a couple of years ago. And I just want to say prayers up to Chase Young because he's a phenomenal player. But when you look at the Washington Commanders on defense in its totality, Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat, these are guys you're going to talk about outside of Chase Young. These guys are terrific defensive linemen. Darren Payne hasn't really lived up to being a first round pick. I believe that was back in 2018 if memory serves me correctly. He still has a lot to prove if you ask me. And there's still some solid players on here as well too. Cole Holmcomb is not a horrible player. Kendall Fuller is definitely getting up there in age, but their secondary is definitely not as strong as you would like. I do think that the Commanders going into the season would have a much better opportunity if Chase Young was there, because he really is another elite threat that adds and helps the back end. But the overall essence of this defense, I think it's middle of the pack at best. They had a lot of potential last year and they didn't really live up to those expectations. Now transitioning into the Jaguars, let's go into the Jaguars offensive side of the things. This has probably been the busiest offseason in the Jaguars history, from not only acquiring Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning head coach, but also just revamping this entire team top to bottom with the coaching staff. All of the free agents, the Jaguars spent, I think, $157 million in guaranteed money in just free agency this offseason. The Jaguars traded back up into the first round after selecting Trayvon Walker and took Devin Lloyd as well too. The Jaguars did a lot of changes this offseason, but let's get into the offensive side of the ball, specifically with the Jaguars. You're going to talk about number 1 overall pick in the 2021 draft in Trevor Lawrence, who I call Mr. Sunshine. And Trevor Lawrence did not play very well in his rookie season. 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, just about a 58% completion percentage from Trevor Lawrence. While that's not very indicative of the talent that he has, and there was a lot of drops on the offensive side of the ball, a lack of skill position players, and a lack of competent coaching, Trevor Lawrence still has a lot to prove, and I do believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to bounce back this season with a much better system around him, better skill position players, and also just the opportunity to learn from his mistakes in his rookie season. You look in the backfield, Doug Peterson said that James Robinson will have a full workload after coming off that Achilles injury. The Jaguars obviously get running back Travis Etienne back, which is going to be huge, and he's going to be a home run explosive player and a Swiss Army knife type of player for the Jaguars on the offensive side of the ball. And then you also look at the skill position players. The Jaguars got a lot of new faces there with guys like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. They get Jamal Agnew back off of injury. Then you have Marvin Jones still there, one of the best veteran wide receivers in the game. There's no longer Laviska Shenault and Laquan Treadwell, but the Jaguars still have guys like Dan Arnold at the tight end position. Evan Ingram comes over from the New York Giants. Tim Jones, an undrafted free agent, makes this roster. And then you look overall at the offensive line too. The Jaguars re-sign Cam Robinson. The Jaguars get Brandon Scherff coming over from the Washington Commanders, one of the best interior guards in the game, and the Jaguars also selected Luke Fortner in the 3rd round out of Kentucky. The Jaguars have a lot of still unproven talent, I would say, on the offensive side of the ball, but I do think that there's still a lot of potential there, especially when you have a great offensive mind and a good offensive philosophy with a guy like Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator, who's worked under Doug Peterson for years. Now let's get into the defensive side of the ball, and for me, for Commanders fans and Jaguar fans that are just now seeing this, I've been extremely high on this Jaguars defense heading into this season. I've spoke reluctantly and I've spoke glowingly about how talented this Jaguars defense is and the potential it has. I've said it from the get-go and I'm going to say it yet again. This Jacksonville Jaguars defense can be top 10, and they will be top 10 by the end of the season. I've already talked about that religiously, and I wholeheartedly believe that. The Jaguars are going to be in a 3-4 defensive scheme this upcoming season under Mike Caldwell coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Mike Caldwell is going to bring something that I think is going to help benefit this Jaguars defense, especially all the young and raw talent that the Jaguars have there, with number 1 overall pick Trayvon Walker, with Josh Allen, who's looking to explode and really have a bounce back season after having a down year the last 2 years after an impressive rookie campaign from Josh Allen. Then you look over at the linebacker core and you look at guys like Foyesade Oluokun. I already addressed Devin Lloyd. Then you look at Chad Muma, and the Jaguars have a lot of great foundational pieces there. And that's not even talking about how immensely talented the back end is. Tyson Campbell, 2nd round pick out of Georgia, really came into his own after some early rookie struggles and bumps. Early throughout the season, Tyson Campbell really became a great lockdown corner. Shaquille Griffin, Darius Williams, Trey Herndon, you got in the secondary. You've still got guys like Rayshawn Jenkins and Andre Sisco and Daniel Thomas. There's a lot to be reckoned with this defense, and I think that it might not happen week 1, it might not happen week 2, but this Jaguars defense is going to get it together, and this defense is immensely talented. They will finish with a top 10 defense in football this year. I'm very confident in that. But now really kind of wrapping up and kind of giving my verdict with this matchup, I do think that this game is really going to come down to both of these quarterbacks, and I know it's a quarterback league, but it's really going to come down to is Trevor Lawrence and Carson Wentz, who's going to make the plays necessarily, because I do believe it'll be a relatively tight game, and which quarterback's not going to make the mistake at the end. If you ask me, and yes, I'm a little bit biased, I have the Jaguars winning this game 26-20. I do think that the Washington Commanders are going to get out to a little bit quicker of a start, but I do think that come second half and come adjustment time, the Jaguars are going to come back and rally back and make this game interesting and ultimately take the W in this game. And I do think that Carson Wentz will be rattled, considering the fact that the Jaguars front seven is significantly better than the Washington Commanders and what they present on the offensive line. I do think that the Jaguars psychologically have an advantage over Carson Wentz just a little bit right now, and I think that Doug Peterson playing into Carson Wentz's tendencies and knowing what he does well and what he doesn't do well will definitely help benefit the Jaguars and this defense. So ultimately, like I said, it's going to come down to these two quarterbacks making plays when it becomes necessary, and I do think that this game is going to be very interesting. I do think Trevor Lawrence ends up going out there and gets 3 total touchdowns this weekend, and I do think Carson Wentz puts on a solid performance, but it's ultimately going to come down to Trevor Lawrence making the plays necessary when it comes down to it, and the Jaguars defense stepping up. That's just my personal thoughts on it. Jaguar fans and Commander fans, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Maybe give me even a bold take and a score prediction down below in the comments, so I want to hear your guys' thoughts, okay? But if you guys enjoyed today's video, man, make sure you guys drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps me on the channel out tremendously. And if you guys are new here, consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA, UCF, and of course, Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. And also, before I let y'all go, make sure y'all go follow me on my socials, especially on Twitter. The link tree will be in the description down below. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day on Twitter. But thanks again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Go Jags, baby. Peace.